So,
The possibilities.
well, as people are starting to come in, I want to make sure that we kind of go ahead and get started and introduce everybody. And so like everybody knows who everybody is and what we're doing here. So for those of you who are joining us, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to do this event. My name is Janelle Gray. I am the founder and co-host creator of Echoes Media. And this is Chris, the
Hey,
co-host.
I'm Chris.
Jack the Ghost is around here, floating around here somewhere. So if you've listened to any of our episodes, you're familiar with Jack the Ghost. You're familiar with us as well. But he is the co-producer. So he is around here helping us with questions that you may have. So I want to go ahead and make sure that I kind of give you some heads up on how things are going to go. Again, for those of you who are joining us and who don't know anything about Echoes Media, like I said, my name is Janelle. A little bit about Echoes Media and how it started. We actually started randomly in the back of my brain somewhere. I wrote a book called Echoes of the Struggle. And that book started conversations with a lot of my friends who wanted to talk about some of the things that they've been struggling with, specifically with respect to discrimination, to racism, to all of the isms and how people were dealing with it. And I decided to start a blog. The blog turned into a podcast, and here we are in season 3 of the podcast. So it's a good run. It's been fun, and we get to have lots of conversations with people and ways that we can continue to better ourselves and live and love on each other. So that is kind of where we are with Echoes. And to let you know a little bit about how today is going to go. So I've told the panelists this. The idea for this started like what, Chris, I think how long ago? It's been like we've probably said in our podcast episodes like 3 or 4 times, we should do, and we're just going to do a whole episode
Right.
on like being an ally. Like we say it.
Yeah, constantly, because so much of everything we talk about like kind of comes back to that. And I think allyship is a big part of the motivation of the whole Echoes enterprise, is to learn how to better
Mm-hmm.
support each other. And so this has been like a very natural thing for us to focus on, at least as long as I've been on the podcast, which is like year and a
Right.
half now.
Yeah. So we've definitely said several times we're going to do an episode. And so finally we're doing an episode, and it gets to be our live event, which is inside for all of the reasons that you all know with the pandemic that's happening. But it's still a live event, and we've got these wonderful panelists. Like, I'm so excited because you guys have different perspectives, and I'm sure you guys are going to have so many different tools and resources that we can use. So I am really excited about that. For those of you who are also joining, there is a link. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat so that you guys can see it. If you wanted to make a donation or purchase raffle tickets, the raffle tickets are on sale through our website, so you can go to that website at any time and get that. The raffle tickets will give you a chance to win an Echoes Media swag box. You have a $15 Amazon gift card or a $25 Uber Eats gift card. And if you're anything like me, Uber Eats has all of your money along with Amazon. So I am hopeful that that will serve you as well as it has served me and killed my entire wallet. And one other thing I just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up on, we don't have a chat available, but we do want you guys to be able to ask questions of our panelists. So there should be a Q&A box. There is a way for you to ask questions anonymously if you would like to ask a question anonymously, or you can just ask question with your name, or we will have a Q&A toward the end of the episode where if you just want to raise your hand and we'll bring you on video and all, and you can actually ask your question by voice. So all of those things will be an option toward the end. So that is my housekeeping thing for before we get started. Chris, did I miss something, or do you just want to like go ahead and do the intro?
No, I don't think you missed anything. So are we going to go through and intro ourselves and our amazing panelists now?
We are. That's exactly what we're going to do.
Well, that is
hey guys.
fantastic.
So, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Echoes on Air. I'm your host, Janelle Gray.
And I'm your co-host, Chris Silverberg.
And we would like to introduce our wonderful, wonderful panelists. We'll start with Mr. Gregg, and then go to Mr. Mitchell, and then go to Ms. Koster. And then if you guys can tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll get you guys to telling us what we could be doing better.
Awesome. Well, wow, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. This is an honor, a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to a good time. Looking forward to a good time. I'm Arthur Gregg. Currently, I serve as the Assistant Vice President for the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement at the University of Texas at Dallas, and I am excited to be here. This is a great time to have this discussion about allyship. Part of what our office does is really help in connecting individuals into learning about each other, allyship, different programs. And so to be here to have this conversation is great. I love the fact that we are having the conversation and taking it to the community. I'm engaged, involved in several boards and different organizations in the community. And so this is also a great refresher for me to up my allyship game as well. And to go in and do some work on being either a better ally or to look at what I'm doing and to see if maybe it's time to be a different ally. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Mr. Mitchell? Uh-oh, you're on mute. Give us just a second.
You know, by the time we're all finished using Zoom, we should be able to read each other's lips.
You're right. That's for sure. That's for sure.
To start again, my name is Edward Ahmed Mitchell. I'm a civil rights attorney. I serve as the Deputy Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations. That is our nation's largest Muslim civil rights organization. Our main focus is countering anti-Muslim bigotry, engaging interfaith dialogue, and promoting other causes of justice around our country. We have about 30 chapters spread around the United States, and alhamdulillah, a great staff of people doing great work around the country. Very happy to be with you all tonight, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Wendy Koster. I practiced law for just about 20 years before I sort of started this new phase of my life that involves mainly my kid. When he was in junior high, he started on this journey of exploring who he truly was. And he also happens to be a theater person, so he was very open about a lot of it. And there were a lot of times where he was representing that community from a pretty young age. And so I had to be the mom and protect him, but let him be open and grow as well. And I have been so lucky in this process to have met so many people with passion and drive and people who changed their minds, people who thought they believed one thing and then experienced through family, through growth, through friendships, that wasn't what they believed at all. So I'm terribly outranked today by the other panelists, but I'm thrilled to be here. And I hope that I can represent in a small way what it's like to be an ally day to day, being the person that people know, oh, that's the one with the trans kid. I could ask her questions. Not necessarily the person that they travel to an office to ask the questions of. At the same time, we talked about this a little before, I feel like this particular issue, the LGBTQ issue, is having a backseat at our house, at least, to issues of race in particular. Even through the month of Pride, it's not the right time for ours to be the main focus. But I am thrilled to be here and happy to learn.
Awesome. So I think the biggest question, or maybe the best question to start off with, is what is allyship? Right? It's super easy. Go for it. Anybody.
Right. Very simple.
Right.
No
It's so
big
simple,
deal.
right? It's such a
Just
simple
define the
question.
whole thing for us.
Right.
But no, really. Whoever wants to jump in, please.
What does it mean to, yeah, jump in. What does it mean to you in particular?
I think, Wendy, you got us started, so I'm going to toss the ball to you.
Oh, well, I think an ally is sort of where I found myself, a person who is interested in fighting for a marginalized group that they don't belong to, but that they realize they have certain advantages and certain positions in life that help them move the cause of a marginalized group along.
I'll echo what Wendy said, and I'll note that, from my perspective, someone who is an ally is someone who is also willing to follow, to be in service to people. So one of the things that I do as a Muslim American is that, when there's an issue that comes up related to anti-Muslim bigotry, Islamophobia, I generally will take the lead on confronting that issue because that is my area of expertise that impacts me and my community. And if I see an issue that is more specifically directly impacting, for example, the Latino community or women or some other issue, well, I want to be in support. I want to be an ally, but I'm not going to put myself in front and take the lead and start dictating things. I'm going to offer to help, make myself available to help. And if the help is wanted and needed, then, we're there to assist, but not there to lead, not even to lead from behind, but just there to be in service to the extent that we are invited to be in service. And I think it's also important to note that being an ally sometimes means knowing when your help isn't wanted. And I'll give you an example. There was Malcolm X, one of my heroes, he tells a story about how, when he was in his activist, he was a little tougher of an activist, and a white female came to him and said, how can I help your cause? And he said, you can't, because he felt that he just wanted Black people to help lift themselves up first. And later he said he regretted saying that to her, that he was, harsh and mean, and there was a different way to deliver the message. But the message he still insisted on up to the day he died is that he wanted Black people to fend for themselves, to lift themselves up first and foremost. And that's not always going to be the case, but there are times when a community may feel they need to just unite and address the issue that's threatening them by themselves, before they look to outside help to address it. So I think being a true ally is knowing when you might need to step back and wait for that moment to step in and assist.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with everything that's said. And also I think about the voice. I think, because I looked the word up, I was just checking out different definitions. And one thing it kind of talked about was coming together for a common cause or purpose. And then I thought about that. I said, the purpose. What is purpose? An ally is one that knows the why. Why are you here? Why are you doing that? Ally, I think also a lot of times is a voice in a space where the voice is not there. And a voice among those who are like them who may not realize that the voice is not there. So again, I like the part about understanding when it is the time to be an ally and a time to kind of take that back seat. And so I really think about what is the purpose, what is the cause, and that it is a cause. It's not a moment. It's a cause. It's not the end thing to do is, oh, I'm an ally. I have my ally sticker. But it is in for the long haul and in there to make change, to make a difference, or even to just help others. So I totally agree with everyone.
It's funny you say that. It makes me, it kind of takes us directly into the next question, because you say it's not like I have my ally sticker, or, it's the fad, it's the in thing to do at the time. What do you think are the common misconceptions about being an ally? If there are any, do you think there are any misconceptions, or?
I will say I'm sure there are plenty. I'm sure that we've seen a lot. And I mean, I won't, I'll let you all answer what they are, but I'm willing to bet.
Well, I'll just note one. I think one possible misconception would be that people who are allies have to agree on everything. that I don't think that's true, and that's not the case. You can partner and work with someone that you may have common cause on one issue and a vigorous disagreement on other issues. There's a funny story. When I first got into civil rights work, a leader of the gay Jewish community in my area wanted to meet with me to talk about ways we could collaborate. And obviously, me being a devout Muslim and being Jewish and gay, people would assume stereotypically that there's going to be all sorts of conflict there. And certainly there are things we disagreed about. We sat down for lunch, and the waiter put me in the back of the restaurant. And when my friend got there, he said, "What, are you trying to hide in the rear in the dark?" And I said, "No, of course not." And we talked, and he said, "Look, I understand you're not going to agree with me on every issue. We may have a different view on same-sex marriage or whatever other issues we have a different view on, but we should both agree that kids don't deserve to be bullied and attacked for who they are, that no one should be assaulted on the street because of what people think they are doing in a relationship." And so we talked about different issues that we could find common cause on, things that we could work on together, while also acknowledging that we were going to have very real differences on some significant issues that were important to him, important to me. But that's okay. We were able to say, yes, I can disagree with you on this important social issue that is dear to you, but I agree with you on this issue, so let's work together. Let's fight this battle on this point, and we'll just not talk about this issue. I know where you stand, you know where I stand. We can still work together without having to agree on everything.
Yeah, I liked it. And I think, Brother Mitchell, you said something earlier about knowing when to be an ally. I think sometimes the thought is, I'm the ally, I've got to go in and take over the fight, show them how to lead the movement and be super ally, as opposed to, kind of assessing, understanding, doing the homework. I like to tell people all the time, if you really want to be an ally, you got to do the homework. You can't come in expecting to take over and lead and not know what you're doing. And so I think allies are people think that they have to have all the answers and go in and they're going to win the battle and they're going to fight the fight, and they don't even know what the fight is really. So, knowing how to be an ally, and necessarily meaning that people don't need you to come in to save them.
I think as far as misconceptions go, I think that's a major misconception. Confusing, people talk a lot about allyship, but also about specifically white saviorism. And I think a lot of people really can't quite tell the difference between, and it goes back to something that we mentioned about following, that as an ally, I think maybe one of the real definition core aspects of being an ally is that ability to take a back seat, to not have to drive the car, even sometimes where you disagree with tactics, maybe, at least some of the time you follow along, or you say, okay, well, I can't help you here, but, tell me what needs to be done, and whatever of that I can do, I will. But, not as much of the no, you can't do it that way because I, as the ally, know best. And I know how you have to do it, and that I think gets into the more of the white saviorism, as opposed to good allyship.
Well, so the main question that we're asking is how to be a good ally, right? So I'm wondering, and this is in particular, this is to everyone, what is an example of, what is an example of a good ally, that you have personally experienced, one particular experience, and what is an example of a bad ally? You don't have to call anybody out. We're just talking about
but if you want to call people out, that's fine.
No, listen, you're not going to turn us into a whole different kind of podcast. That's what you're not going to do, Christopher.
So they're not on this link.
I'm just saying, be open.
Right.
They're not on this link. I know for me, I can say a good ally is someone, like I said earlier, who has done the homework, who understand, who is taking the time to really understand the cause and why, and they have the passion about it, and they're willing to say, where can I be used the most? What do I need to do if it's a call campaign or whatever it is? Where can I utilize my talents the best? Where do you guys need me? And that's what I've seen. And ask, what do you want in an ally? It's kind of like in this relationship. What are your expectations of an ally? I think sometimes we just jump in. I was an ally in this, and this is what we did here. So I'm just going to move this allyship over here. And that's what I've seen on the bad side of not such a great ally is someone who's taken all these experiences. Hey, I've got all the training, I've done all this, I've got my stickers, I am super ally, I'm gonna come in and save you, versus someone who says, hey, I've done the homework, I may not understand everything, so I need your help. I need to know how I best fit, and let's have this conversation around what allyship looks like to you, and what are your expectations? And here, let me share some of my expectations with you of what I think an ally is, and having those conversations.
Along those lines, I think something that's important, both in being a good ally and something that you can become a very poor ally if you don't have humility and know that you're going to make mistakes. It's just, if you're not part of the group, you're not even, obviously you've got the job of educating yourself and continuing to educate yourself. You're still going to make mistakes, and having the humility to acknowledge it, apologize, and be ready to move on instead of making it about you and your emotional response to it. I think in looking at some of the things we kind of examined for the purposes of tonight, the whole idea of it's the impact that's important, not the intent. It just hit home with me so hard that it doesn't matter if you were trying, if you're talking about a marginalized group, what matters is how did it affect the marginalized group, and really hear that and really be willing to be criticized for not understanding the impact that you had.
Yeah, I think those are great points all around. In terms of my experience, obviously, so just to give you a little background, I shifted to civil rights law in 2016. I became the director of CARE in Georgia in 2016. So this was in the months before all sorts of madness happened, from, Donald Trump being elected, the Pulse nightclub massacre, Muhammad Ali passing away. It was just a crazy year of event after event after event. And so, we welcomed any support we could get. Our community was under siege in many different ways, and continues to be so in some ways. And so, I was happy to see that people of different backgrounds were quick to join us at protests, quick to speak out when we didn't ask them to. I will say that, the one example of a good ally that I appreciate is John Lewis. When the Muslim ban was first introduced, the first one in January 2017, thousands of people went to the airport to protest. I was there, and there's a huge crowd there, thousands of people at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And all of a sudden I notice a ripple in the crowd, and I look down and I see these broad shoulders, this bald brown head, and I realize it's Congressman John Lewis, who is, come up and shown up. No one asked him to, and is in the crowd, not even to speak. He did not give a speech. He was there just to express support. And he had spent hours in the airport asking about travelers who'd been detained and gone missing because of the Muslim ban. No one asked him to do that. And we all know John Lewis had done enough protesting to last a lifetime. He did not have to be there. He could have stayed home, issued a statement condemning the Muslim ban, and watched the rest of it on TV. And over again in recent years, I would see him show up, sometimes just out of nowhere, at major protests against gun violence, for DACA recipients, against abuse at the border of immigrants. And so I really appreciate when someone who does not have to be there, right? There's no obligation. They're not, building their career. They're not in charge of an organization. They've already given what they had to give to the community, and they still take the time to show and put themselves in the line. I really do appreciate that sort of person. I also appreciate all the other types of allies, but I also really appreciate our older generation who continue to be there in the fight. And John Lewis is there until he died. I mean, just a few weeks ago, he was in DC at the Black Lives Matter mural outside of the White House. So I do appreciate those people who step up when they really, really have nothing in particular to gain and no obligation to be there.
So we've got a couple of questions that are in our Q&A. So just as a reminder, you can utilize the Q&A, and we'll be kind of popping back and forth to some of those. And if we don't get to your question right now, we are going to do a formal Q&A toward the end. So if you haven't heard it answered like immediately, just hang tight. We promise we'll get to everything that's on there. One question that I think is actually maybe perhaps in response to how we've defined allyship. The question is, by your definition of a good ally, would Candace Owens be a quote unquote good ally? And I love that like there are people that immediately smile. So maybe someone could answer that question, maybe answer a little bit about Candace Owens if you don't know who she is. And then she's a controversial person right now, but I would like to, I'm like, Chris is laughing at me because he sees me like being very careful, but I will yield to our panelists.
I don't know who wants to take that one. I mean, I like to save my oxygen for beneficial things, but I'll just say briefly. So Candace Owens is an African-American woman, very politically conservative, a supporter of President Trump. She has expressed views that many of us would consider controversial, hostile to various minorities. The one remark that she made that I thought was beyond the pale was a remark she made about Hitler and socialism, saying that Hitler, what he was doing wasn't that bad until he, became violent. Up until that point, it wasn't that bad. It was when he took socialism too far that he became dangerous. And that's just one of many crazy things that Miss Owens has said. She also often will respond to incidents of police brutality and police violence by sometimes attacking the victim, like George Floyd, or diverting the conversation to the issue of black on black violence. In terms of can she be a good ally, I would note that assuming that Candace Owens is not looking for publicity or attention, assuming that she says the things she says because she genuinely actually does care about people, and I will, for the sake of argument, assume that, then in her mind, maybe she thinks she is being a good ally by speaking what she thinks is the truth, even though it's very controversial. So I'll give her respect for being bold and saying what she may think is the truth. But, being a good ally is not only whether or not you think you are being a good ally, but whether the people that you are supposedly trying to ally with think you are being helpful to them. And I, as a black man, as a Muslim, do not feel assisted or helped by Candace Owens, even if her intentions are good, if they're good. I don't feel helped by Candace Owens and the things that she says. I think that she is used by white racists to justify and excuse the horrible things they want to believe. And they can use her to say these things and say, well, look, I'm not a racist, I'm not a bigot. She said it, so, it must be okay. So I don't consider Candace Owens a good ally, but maybe she thinks that she is. I can't read her mind.
I would agree, and again, it depends on to what group. Like you said, she may be a good ally to them. I think you have to define what's good for you, we use that word good very loosely, and so what may be good for your cause or for that cause or a cause that she's with, she may be a great ally. Again, I agree, she's not for me and my cause. I wouldn't say she was a good ally for me. She may have great skill, allyship-ish skill, if that's what you want to call it. But I think it goes back to what's the cause? Who are we asking for? Is there a particular group? Just in general, and I think if you generalize it, she may be a great ally for somebody.
I mean, yeah, if I can be a tiny bit controversial, but not political, because this is a non-political show, I would say that Candace Owens is a great ally to anti-racists. Basically, like, she's really good at being a mouthpiece for things that I think most people who are opposed to anti-racism would agree with. I think that a lot of them would say, yeah, you are doing a lot of things that allies do, right? Like, in theory, she's going into communities that most white racists don't have access to. At least in theory, right? She's speaking to a black audience that might not be reached by other white people who are opposed to sort of contemporary anti-racism movements. And and she, you know, it's kind of not part of the, she's not a racist white person, but she kind of helps to advocate for causes that a lot of people on, I won't even call them racist, but people who are opposed to anti-racism or whatever current anti-racism looks like. Yeah, she's advancing a lot of their beliefs while not being a part of that community, technically. So, yeah, I mean, although I will say that I remember at the beginning of the conversation, we defined allyship in part as being an ally to a marginalized group. And I can't think of a marginalized group that Candace Owens would be considered an ally to. But if you let go of that part of it, then yeah, she's a great ally.
I mean, that's a big part to let go of, though. So, like,
I mean, I'd say it's the main part, but your mileage may vary.
I mean,
that's
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I think this kind of goes back to something that it's so funny. I'm like, Mr. Arthur Gregg, like, I've known you for so long, like I keep trying to like give you 8 names, Mr. Gregg. But it kind of goes back to something that you said toward the beginning, where you talked about, you know, what it means to someone in particular. And I think, Mr. Mitchell, you said something about like, or I think it was you, Mr. Gray, that you're talking about kind of like a relationship. It's a relationship where you're trying to determine, you know, what does allyship mean, and to you or to this particular person. And then Mr. Mitchell's response is like, when he said to me, she's not a good ally to me, I think that kind of, those two statements really illustrated a very large part about what we're talking about, right? So you can be a different kind of, or your allyship can look different depending on who you are trying to advocate for. It will morph, even, and not even just specifically to, you know, a group of people. It could shift even to a personal, you know, there are certain people who need you to show up in certain ways, and then there are other people who prefer you not show up in certain ways. And so perhaps the answer to that question also is, you know, identifying who she's an ally to. And yeah, I think we can move right on from Miss Candace. We're gonna awkwardly shift from that. How can we be an ally as an individual, and like as a family, as a group? Because I think, you know, a lot of times in like family settings, or even in work settings, you know, you can be a personal ally to somebody, but you're also a part of a unit somewhere, whether it's you know, part of some of your job, or if you're marching a pride parade with your job, or if you are being like, how does that differ? And how can we, I don't know, maybe participate? Does it look different if we're participating individually in that versus within a unit? I feel like I gave y'all a hard question unintentionally. It wasn't.
I'm not going first on that one. I defer to my distinguished colleague.
I will say this, I think in our experience, because the family experience of having a transgender family member, it's sometimes really easy for an individual to take a step that doesn't feel that big, but is completely the act of an ally. For instance, there was a time when my son and I were at a play, and it was the talk back, and the person who was kind of running the talk back, who had been involved in the theater and that show in particular, took a question or a comment from him and knew to use the right pronouns and made a point of it. You know, that's huge. If you are with someone and you are the adult, and there is someone who is struggling with being misgendered, to be able to say, I'm here, oh, well, my nephew here will have, you know, the hamburger. Being able to kind of jump ahead in a family kind of relationship. So you're not, I am the more important person, but being able to protect a kid who doesn't always want to have to fight for that sort of thing is so big, is so big. And it's different from marching with a group and your corporation, you know, having a week of marking LGBTQ issues. But the personal is what I experience the most, and it just hits you right where you live.
Well, I think that's a good example because it shows how within an institution, so, you know, as an employee of a theater or whatever, you can ensure that you're welcoming. And I'm curious about, like, where's the line between can a whole institution, or especially a for-profit corporation, can that whole institution be an ally, or do you just have to find ways to be an ally, little ways, like using the right pronouns inside of that institution? You know, especially in a moment like right now where we have so many corporations, both for Pride Month and in response to the recent Black Lives Matter protests. We have so many corporations putting out statements and making declarations. So I'm interested in, like, where's the line there between what we can do interpersonally in an organization versus are we constrained by having to work inside these larger institutions? Do the larger institutions, can they do anything really useful for a protest movement? Can corporations be allies? I'm curious about all that.
So good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So I work in the educational industry in the university. We have the #1 school LGBTQ plus friendly accepting campus in the state. We're like #5 in the country because the university believes in it. The university supports it. We have a gender center that has an amazing staff. We've had different policies and procedures changed to be more accommodating to our LGBTQ plus students. We've everything from dropping dead names to what our bathroom, our facilities look like, to the services and the funding that's put towards it. We have a large ERG, which is our employee resource group, that supports along with allies. We do a safe zone training and ally training on the campus. And so when you say can a large institution be an ally? Yes. But it has to start with the top. It has to be within the system and not just the one little corner to say, okay, we're going to put you over in this little corner in the back and you do this work. It has to be across the campus. It has to be across the organization. It has to be a part of the mission of the organization. And so, you know, one of the things I think someone said earlier about where do you draw the line, you know, when you're talking about work. And me personally, if I'm down with you, I'm down with you. You know, work, you know, because I can't be several different people. If I'm your ally, I'm your ally. If I'm at work, I'm your ally, you know. And so those are things though that I had to, when you go back and say doing your homework and understand your why. Why are you doing it? Why is this important to you? Why do you feel that you need to be this ally? And you have to ask yourself those questions. You have to do the work and do that. And so to try to say, well, I'm going to be here and I see y'all over there and I'm quietly supporting you. For some people that works. But for how long can you do that? And so to kind of, you know, put those two together, I think that, you know, we have to look at some of these corporations. And my thought is with the statements, to me, the statements are almost becoming like hashtags. You know, every week someone's putting out a statement. Somebody's putting out a statement. After a while, how long will we continue to put out statements? And the statement is just a statement. If there's nothing behind the statement but the statement, you could have kept that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would say whenever I see a major corporation adopting Black Lives Matter, whatever other slogan used to be controversial, I get a little worried, because if it's acceptable to them to use, then I worry about whether or not they have now figured out a way to co-opt it, to pacify it. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King was loathed and hated in this country. Applause broke out in many places when news of his death broke. But now, even people who are racist in many ways will celebrate Dr. King and say he's a great example of peace and all this stuff because they figured out a way to pacify him. And they're happy to use his image for pacification purposes. And so I just worry when you see corporations or even major politicians who pursue policies that are harmful to the Black community, for example, suddenly being willing to say Black Lives Matter. I don't necessarily feel good about it because it's hard to take it seriously. And I wonder if it's the first step towards co-opting something that had real meaning and repurposing it in a way that will not be as effective or impactful. Now, maybe I'm just becoming cynical in my old age, but that's a thought I'll just share.
Well, if I can follow up just a little bit, I'm sorry if y'all don't mind, if I could just follow up a little bit on that. So it sounds like I heard both that, yes, an institution can be an ally if there's like real commitment from the top, but also there's some things that we should be worried about when we see institutions start to perform allyship, you might say. So can y'all go a little deeper for me on what can an institution do to really be, maybe even specifically for the Black Lives Matter movement, like what could an institution do to really be an ally, and then what should we be on the lookout for that might turn out bad?
Well, first, if you say you believe Black Lives Matter, but your corporation is donating thousands of dollars to politicians who oppose criminal justice reform, who engage in racist behavior, then do you really believe that Black Lives Matter? So number one, I say always follow the money when you're looking at major corporations. Who are they donating to? Who are they trying to put into elected office? That is the first thing I wonder. Number two is, well, how many on your board of directors, there are plenty of qualified people of color who could be running corporations. How many members of your board of directors, how many members of your senior staff, how many of your CEOs have ever been people of color or women or whatever the other issue is that you're trying to express support for? So that's the second thing that I look at. And then actually I'll stop. Those are, I think, two things where you will immediately be able to tell who is really willing to put their money where their mouth is and who's just talking.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, the corporation, the company that says Black Lives Matters, but won't allow their staff to wear anything reflective of that at work. Mm-hmm. I'm like, so I can't wear this, but you say it matters. So this whole mixed message, oh yeah, we're down. We're really down. And I like the piece what you said about where the dollars go, because that's true. Mm-hmm. Where the dollars go, who are they supporting? I think, when you think about the whole Black Lives Matters, it's, well, if we don't say it, then people are going to think that we're racist. So we've got to get on this bandwagon, and we've got to put it in our slogans, and we've got to pay money for commercials to let you know that Black Lives Matters. But then when you look at the percentage of your leadership team, the Black life is not there to matter.
For that matter, who made the commercial? That's something I've never looked into. Like, if you're going to hire all these people to make Black Lives Matter commercials, did Black people make the commercial?
Right. So you have to really look at where, and who did they talk to when they made the commercial? How did they, I've said a lot, I've talked a lot, and someone said this in the chat about doing the homework. What does that mean? What does that look like to do the homework? And so I think about recently, I think it was Chris Como did a piece on what systemic racism looked like, what it was. And he pretty much outlined throughout history how systemic racism played so much of history. And so I say, things like sharing that information, reading the books, understanding how all this began. Where did this come from? How did we get to where we are? Going back to what Mr. Mitchell was saying earlier about looking at understanding where the dollars are going, where your dollars are going. So really understanding how we got here is doing the homework, is reading, understanding, asking those questions, asking hard questions. I think sometimes people feel that they cannot ask questions because they will be perceived as, either naive or they're just, that was offensive. And a lot of times it's not what you ask, it's how you ask it. And so when I'm talking about doing the homework, I'm talking about not going to your Black friend and say, I need you to help me understand the struggle, and then putting your Black friend through this emotional labor as opposed to you going and you doing the research and you understand, how did we get here? You know, what's redlining? It's so funny. We're talking about things now. I happened to be watching Good Times the other night, and it was an episode, and Michael was talking, the Evans family was trying to buy a house, and he was educating his family on redlining. And we're talking, this was not, the Good Times went off a long time ago. So the conversation has been going on. So there's lots of material out there that you can learn from. Yeah. It's not something that somebody just wrote an article on yesterday. So when I say doing the homework and going back, researching those companies that are talking about Black Lives Matter and finding out, does Black lives really matter to them, or do Black dollars rather matter? Mm.
I want to get to some of these questions because we've got like questions stacked on questions, and there are a lot of good ones. So one question says, is it worth sticking with a large organization that is refusing to lead from the top? Can our allyship energies be better put to use within systems or structures that are open to change?
I'll just say briefly, I'm always a believer in, I didn't fully understand the question, whether she meant, you know, if you're working for a large organization, or are you talking about a business, a corporation, an activist group? I wasn't really sure about that part of the question, but I'll just generally say that I am a big believer in the importance of trying to change things from within, if you have that opportunity to do so. So whether that's working at a corporation, being part of an organization, no organization is perfect, no corporation is perfect. But if you are given an ability to speak freely, to make progress and to push for change, then that's something I wouldn't necessarily give up unless you just really hit a brick wall, or if the corporation or organization is engaging in harmful behavior. It's one thing just to not be helpful. You know, a lot of people aren't helpful, but it's another thing to actually be harmful to people. So, you know, if you're part of an organization, business that is indifferent on the sidelines, you know, that's one thing. You know, go to work, get your paycheck, and carry on, you know, if you need to. But if you're in a business organization that gives you that flexibility to push for change, then I wouldn't necessarily walk away. I would just, you know, be hopeful and keep trying to change what you can, because we can't say, you know, we cannot individually expect to save the world. What we can expect to do, and this is something that we're taught as Muslims, the Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, taught us, is that you try to change the world around you. You try to help do what you can in the world around you. If you see something wrong, change it with your hands. If you can't do that, try to change it with your mouth. And if you can't do that, then at least hate the wrong in your heart. And that's the weakest bit of faith, but the least you can do. So worry about yourself, your family, your community, your workplace, and go out from there. But don't worry yourself to death thinking that you've got to change everything right away all around you. It doesn't work that way.
And it looks like, from, if I am seeing a follow-up correctly, that they're mentioning working within the organization. So as other people answer, is it worth sticking with a large organization in terms of working within that organization, is what I believe is being asked.
Yeah, I think sometimes you got to look for who else is blowing the horn. If you're the only one that's taking on this, you know, there apparently probably are other people who are out there doing it. And sometimes, you know, the thing with allyship is knowing how to connect it with other allies. And so if you're the only one trying to make the ball move, you know, sometimes you may have to step back and see, are there other individuals who are on the same page or trying to push for the same things that you're pushing for as far as this allyship? And how do you connect up and work together? And I think that means going beyond folk who look like you and maybe who act like you and maybe who drive the same types of cars that you do. And so really kind of looking for who are other individuals who are in the same mindset and trying to work together. Again, you can't do this thing alone. However, knowing if you're in there thinking it, you're not alone.
So there's another question. It says, can you address how a person can be an ally after being told that you cannot because as a Jewish person you oppress others, i.e. Palestinian people?
That's a very interesting question. So, you know, I am a very strong advocate of Palestinian human rights. I'm a very strong critic of the Israeli government's human rights abuses against Palestinian people. But I would never, ever say to a Jewish person that you cannot be my ally because you're Jewish, and Jewish people, that's stupid. It's collective blame, and it's anti-Semitic, in my opinion, to attribute what the Israeli government does to all Jewish people or any Jewish person. I don't expect that people, when they see Saudi Arabia or Iran doing something they disagree with, to look at me and say, Edward, what's up with that? You know, I don't work for the Saudi government. I'm not in charge, right? That's not me, and I'm not responsible for that. Just like I don't blame all Christians for what Donald Trump does, even though he claims to be a leader of the Christian community in America. So I would just say to the individual asked that question, if someone literally did say to you, you're Jewish and you oppress people, you know, because of what is happening to Palestinians, what they said is stupid and racist and bigoted. Now, if they said to you, you know, you, and they mean you in particular, they know that you, for example, support the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians, and they say, look, I do not want your support as long as you are supporting the Israeli government. Well, that's different because they're talking about something that's specific to you, something they know you do, and you can't begrudge someone, you know, saying that I don't want to welcome your support if you are supporting harm to people that I care about somewhere else. So I think that's a fair point and perfectly reasonable. But it's not fair to have a blanket statement of anyone who is Muslim or Jewish or whatever, you can't be my ally because someone who claims to be Muslim or Jewish is doing bad things. That's insane and ridiculous and has no basis in activism or common sense.
Totally.
That was like a mic drop moment, right?
Yeah.
Right, that was so on point.
It really is. I mean,
And so there's that.
you know, it's individual versus group. I mean, you know, and who is this person to tell you that you can't be an ally? I mean, I go and question, you know, who gives you the authority to tell me what I can and cannot do, in the place of allyship? And I think sometimes the question is that's how we lose people, is that one individual may have had a difference with another individual. And so they will paint individuals all alike and say, well, you can't do this because of that. And, you know, I was just raised, you know, to ask questions. And who are you and who gives you that authority? That works for me. I'm a big dude, you know, so, but I go back and say, though, I think, again, in that allyship, you know, I was thinking about something earlier about allyship and fear. You know, I don't believe that they can operate they can't coexist. You know, you as an ally, you got to have some tough skin. You know, and if you're truly into this and you're truly about this, you got to find where your allyship is going to work. And it may not be with that particular organization right there, but believe you me, somebody out there needs your allyship. Don't stop because of one individual or one small group.
I think that's that tough skin thing is very important, especially right now. There are a lot of people who are struggling with how to enter, I guess, into the conversation. How do I come in and what do I do? But then because they may or may not have experience of feeling, I guess, that negative pushback consistently, whether it is on the basis of your race or your gender or your religion or whatever it is, because they're not necessarily fluent in that type of pushback the first time that they encounter it. It becomes a little uncomfortable, and then it kind of pushes them out of the conversation a little bit. So I wonder if maybe you could speak to what that may look like for somebody, and how to deal with that if they're kind of pushed out of that conversation and what they can do.
I think there are times when maybe you need to take a step back and just listen. And maybe everybody needs a little bit of breathing room. Going back to the idea of humility and just knowing you might not be the expert in this. And if someone is telling you that now is not your time to be speaking, take it for what it's worth. And if you are not the expert, acknowledge you're not the expert, take a step back, let everybody breathe. And then if somebody needs your allyship in a different way or in the same way, they'll let you know. But I think you have to be thick-skinned to be an ally, and you have to expect to get your feelings hurt sometimes, and to take those feelings elsewhere and process them elsewhere and not make it all about you, and come back when you're ready and stronger and able to do the work.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And everyone, I'll just have to pause to note that we're Muslims, we pray 5 times a day, so it's time for me to pray one of my daily prayers. So I'm going to step away, take about 10 minutes to pray, and then I'll be back and join you shortly, God willing.
Thank you. So there is another question. I'm going back and forth between like the questions that are on here. Chris, I don't know if you have a question that you thought was good, but I can go back and forth because we've got so many questions. And I want to make sure that we get to all of them before we end. So I'll go to the next one. What would be the difference between an ally and a resource? And then a follow-up question to that is every ally a resource, or is every resource an ally? And if I'm not asking that question correctly, let me know. But what say you to that?
When I think about what a resource, I think about what a resource brings to the table as far as quote unquote, resources, individuals. I think allies can be resources. I think allies are ones who are at the table helping with the resources. And so when we talk about being a resource, some resources aren't allies. They're just specifically there to bring in, hey, I got this resource. Hey, I've got this connection, and that's where I'm comfortable, and that's where I feel that I am useful or I am helpful to the cause. To where some allies, or they may not have a network or a group of resources, but they're going to be there, kind of like what Wendy said, or what Mr. Mitchell said about they're going to show up sometimes in just their presence to be there. They're going to be where they need to be and assist how they need to assist. So I think that they can be one and the same, but they don't have to be the same.
Kidding. I know how to work Zoom, promise. I'm not on mute now. Okay, so how do you feel about, so I think you made mention of this earlier, Mr. Gregg, but about going to your Black friend and asking them to, walk through this trauma, whatever this trauma is that you're asking about, kind of in line with that question about being a resource. What do you think is a good way for someone to reach out to somebody for assistance in a way that doesn't become cumbersome? Because on a personal note, for me, it does get heavy, and it is one of those things that you don't want to talk about it all the time, every day. And by sheer fact that I run Echoes, I kind of have to be in something like this all day, every day. But when I have just a regular relationship, I don't necessarily want to chat about it all the time. So but I also don't want to turn people away. So for people who maybe need allies and for people who are, I guess, reaching out to people as a resource, how do you suggest that people manage those relationships?
It's interesting you asked that. I've heard friends that say, friends that I went to school with umpteen years ago reached out to me on Facebook or through LinkedIn and was like, oh, hey, I'm thinking of you and how are you doing? And and they were like, so this was so random, and it was like, we don't have a relationship. So are you doing this to make you feel good? That you reached out to your Black friend or you reached out to your friend and you want them, or why? That was always the question. It was why. And so when I think about that, I think about being in relationship with people. Sometimes it's just saying, hey, I don't know the trauma that you're dealing with. I don't know what you're going through, but I would like to be here if you need me. Or help, you know, if because one thing people will tend to say is, help me help you. I don't need help. I'm good, I got you. You know, but it's your wording, it's being in relation with people. It's that humility piece. I don't know it all. I can't begin to think or understand, but I would like to support. And I think on the flip side to that, we have to allow people to help. We have to open some space to say, yes, it is emotionally draining. I'm tired. I'm tired of talking about it. This is why. It's not about you personally, but this is where I am. And so I think if that begins the conversation, a lot of times it's the turnoff. It's, why are you asking me this? You should know what I'm going through. And the other side is, I don't know, and I don't know what to ask because I don't want to upset you. So it is a thin line, but part of it has to do with relation. It's humility. It's being in a place to say, okay, I don't understand, but I will step back. You know, and so that I think for some people is hard because they want to press the issue, but I want to help, but I'm really a nice person, but I'm not a racist or homophobic. I want to be here for you. Where were you the last 20 years before George Floyd? Where were you when the group was going to lunch and nobody invited me? Where were you when my boss made remarks about us in a staff meeting? So, but now you want to help. Okay, I got your number.
Yeah, I think to build on that a little bit, I think that I think that people should understand that it is very difficult to reach out to someone as a resource without there already being a relationship. Like and it's true, I too sometimes am just like, but I don't want to talk about this right now. But if there's a relationship there, so I know it's coming from a sincere place, okay, maybe I can muster the energy to engage you at least a little bit. But when there's just no relationship there, and now it's just like maybe try to build a relationship first. And also, if you find yourself as the sort of person who really wants to be an ally, and every time a new issue is in the news, you want to learn about it and you want to be educated about it, well, that sounds like that's a good cause to go ahead and try to make friends with some people from marginalized groups before it gets in the news, right? Like, if you're the sort of person that there's going to be a Supreme Court decision in next year and everyone's going to be talking about it and you want to know how you can help, do you know anybody from that group? Have you been to any meetings? Be proactive about issues. Think, you can go through and be like, okay, I know that, I'm not saying like right now, but 6 months from now, a year from now, when Black Lives Matter is not in the news as much, that's the time where you go, I really cared about this Black Lives Matter issue, but I didn't know anybody that was directly affected. How can I go somewhere and actually diversify my social circle so the next time that this is in the news and I really want to help and I really want to know where to go, I'll know already because I'll already just be in relationship with people. And not even just any Black person I can find. I just want a Black friend. Go make friends with activists. If you're passionate about this, go see if you can find somebody else who is also passionate, and that way you have a common interest. So it's not just like, I need a Black friend. It's like, I need a friend who has experience in this area where I have a strong interest. So yeah, that's also my 2 cents on the resource and relationship thing.
I am interested in what your opinion is on privilege and how that plays into allyship. Because I think a little bit, you kind of, I think all of you have kind of mentioned a little bit here and there, but I just want to ask the direct question. And understanding that everybody has a certain privilege, and that privilege it can affect your relationship when you're seeking to be an ally. So maybe could you talk a little bit about how what part privilege plays in allyship, and kind of ways that you can kind of check yourself?
I think you start by recognizing it, and knowing what you don't know and what you need to start learning. And for all of it, for the good and the bad, and how that's going to affect your relationships with people you want to be an ally to, and then how you can apply that privilege in a way that helps you, or helps you be an ally to the group that you want to help. And knowing that you have connections, that you have relationships, that you have access to spaces that maybe some of the people you're trying to be an ally to don't have. And acknowledging it for what it is. And just moving forward from that without beating yourself up about the privilege so much that you just can't go on and you can't do the work of being an ally.
Yeah, I think we have used privilege, so I don't believe all privilege is bad. I think we tend to see privilege as a bad. You're privileged, you don't understand. I think because we're all privileged, I think when we go back and look at it, it's what you do with the privilege. It's how you use the privilege to be an ally. I think, as Wendy said it, you're in spaces, you're in connections, you're in places where others may not be because of that privilege. And your allyship is needed there, whether it's raising funds, whether it's resources. And I think it's how we use our privilege and check it. It's kind of like, how does it work for you? If it's like superpowers. If you use your superpowers for evil, you will be evil. If you use your superpowers for good, you are good. So how do you use your privilege? Are you using it for the betterment of people? Are you using it for the betterment of self? And I think that as an ally with privilege, you got to use that privilege to get in those spaces, to have those conversations, to do those things that are going to move, to advance your cause. But you got to understand what your privilege is and how it can be turned evil so quickly. And so that goes back to understanding the why, knowing your why you're an ally, why you're an ally with this group. What is it about this group that you are passionate about moving it forward? And then how do you interweave your privilege in that why? And I like what you said, Wendy, about not beating yourself up over privilege. People tend to beat themselves up when they don't use it in the right way. That's just a thought.
You said something about, like, both of you said about spaces, and I think that's a really good, but I think I want to, just one little thing, I want to make a little left into that. When you're talking about these spaces, and you're with friend groups, you're with family groups, you're with these people that you're now challenged, right? Now that you've kind of become more aware of where your areas of privilege are, and you're starting to speak out more. And now you're in an area with a friend or a family member or at work where you hear something and your instinct is to be an ally, right? Because that's now the muscle you've been working out, right? You've been working this muscle of being an ally, and here we go. And then you get in that space where you're going to be an ally, and your best friend or your family member or somebody says something that completely deflates you. What do you do then? Because I feel like in that situation, it would be easy to want to retreat, right? It would be easy. You want to preserve, especially in relationships that you want to preserve, friendships you want to preserve, work relationships that you need to preserve. what does allyship look like in those areas where you know that, as Wendy mentioned, this is the area you're needed in. These are the spaces you're needed in. And as you mentioned, these are the spaces that you're supposed to use your privilege in. How do you walk that line between using your privilege in that space, but still preserving the relationships that you need or have to preserve?
I mean, I'm gonna be fair with you. That's tough. That's hard. It is hard. Sometimes you have to retreat to kind of process yourself, you know, and so you got to step away from it for a moment. I think we are so quick to react. We got to kind of step back from it, because yeah, you want to value, and then in the relationship, you want to keep the relationship with your family, and in a lot of cases, you want to stay in your family, you know, and so you gotta retreat. You gotta think about your family dynamic, and you gotta think about, you know, what's the best way for me to be an ally in this moment with this group? Understanding the dynamics of your family or your friend or it may not come by a way that you would handle it with someone else. So you gotta be strategic. You gotta be a strategic ally and think of what is the best way that they're gonna get it, that we're gonna get it. And you know, as we said, we're not gonna fall out forever or until we have the next conversation. You know, and so I think that's the challenging part about an ally. And I think sometimes people think that being an ally is that you go in, you get this PO, you get this T-shirt that says ally, and that's all you have to do. Allyship is continued work. You have to continue to work on yourself. You have to continue to work on relationships. You got to continue to work on allies. What does that mean? And so I think the more you do that work, the better at it you become. The better you become, the easier it is for you to have those conversations with those family members, with those friends in those spaces. You're not going to just come out the box super ally, but you know, again, once you get your ally sticker or your T-shirt, it doesn't mean that it stops there. The learning, the growing, the development continues for allyship in that piece. We have what's called safe zone training, and I'm behind. I can be honest about that, but I'm about 2 trainings behind because things change so quickly. And I'm still on 2018 safe zone. And I have my allyship there has expired. So I've got to update my allyship to make sure that I'm still in line with what's going on. So I think with that is just to simple answer to your question, for me, it's an ongoing process as an ally, and you got to understand and know the dynamics and how to have those conversations in those spaces with family and friends.
I went through all of these questions with my kid because, you know, I'm not the LGBTQ person. So we visited about all of them, and something he brought up to me, which is so obvious, but you sometimes get so caught up in trying to get the right answer to the question, was just imagine what it's like to be the marginalized person in that conversation, in that workplace, in that family. And you've got to weigh that too. That doesn't mean you trash every job, you trash every family, but you've got to weigh what your allyship means to you as well, and what you're able to do in that specific situation, given your privilege and given the leeway that you think you have or you don't have.
Mr. Mitchell, you came back just in time. There's a question for you. So
depends on what the question is. Maybe it's bad time. Let's see what it is.
So it says, Edward spoke about being an ally with nothing to gain. I believe one of the misconceptions in my mind is that everyone has to be on the front lines. I was wondering, for those who may be afraid of backlash for showing support, i.e. losing their job, but still want to be a good ally, how can they do so? So I think this is going back to when you spoke about working from the inside.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone, you know, should do what they can. I mean, no one is asking. I'm certainly, as a Muslim, would never ask a quote unquote ally to give up their livelihood and put their family at risk by posting something on Facebook or joining a protest. Because at the end of the day, your presence there is not going to decide whether or not we keep our civil rights or not. It will help. It'll be one step in the struggle, but I also don't want harm to come to you unnecessarily. So I think people should do, what they can do up to the point that they can do it and it's not going to be unduly harmful to them or their families. Now, having said that, if you're willing, to take the risk and take the hit in those circumstances in order, because you think it's so important to express solidarity with your neighbors, then by all means, go for it. But just know that that is your decision to make. I'm not expecting that from you, and I'm not going to fault you if you choose not to make that decision. Everyone has got to feel comfortable doing, what they can. I would only ask that you do no harm. I'm not saying you got to help, but at least do no harm is all I would ask if you feel like you can. Now, if you want to do something, you feel like you can't do public things, then of course you can always privately donate. You can send a private message of support and solidarity. I'll tell you that some of the most heartening things that I've received as a Muslim civil rights quote unquote leader are just the private messages from people saying, saw you in the news, I'm with you, this is a shame what's happening. At my local mosque, we, after, I can't remember if it was the Muslim ban or the shooting in New Zealand, but after some negative incident, a woman left a piece of paper saying, I'm not a Muslim, but, I believe everyone has the right to practice their religion. Here's $20. That's what I can spare. And I wish you all well. We still got that letter posted up in our mosque several years later. It was $20. It was a nice little letter, didn't change much, but it was appreciated. So even little small gestures like that will make you feel good, makes us feel good, and you still got your job at the end of the day. So whatever you can do, without unduly harming yourself, go for it, God willing. But again, we're not demanding you put yourself at risk. If you want to do that, great, go for it, but, make that decision yourself.
And if I can, I want to seize on something you just said with regards to do no harm. And in our previous question we were discussing, we were talking about sort of how to be an ally in that interpersonal way, and how to talk like an ally when you're in a conversation that may veer into a inappropriate or to in a racist or a homophobic or whatever direction. And I think that do no harm point is really valuable, because you may not always be willing to take the risk of standing up and saying, that's the most racist thing I've ever heard. But honestly, I feel like going conspicuously quiet can be actually a way to signal something without saying anything. When a conversation goes in a certain direction, maybe you don't feel ready to stand up and declare anything, but I'm just gonna kind of fade out of this conversation. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna look a little uncomfortable. A lot of times people will get the message even just from that.
Yeah, silence can be acquiescence. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a very fair point. Again, it depends on circumstances, right? If you are in the midst of seeing something wrong happening, right, and if your silence would then make you a party to what is wrong being said or done, then you may have an obligation to do something. Maybe then your silence is actually not do no harm. It's actually causing harm by emboldening someone to carry on. And in fact, when they see you silent, they may continue to say things and escalate things even further. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all rule, right? I think you made an excellent example of when it would be appropriate to do or say something, and when silence would actually be quite harmful, even though it's not action.
We're I feel like time has gone by so fast, but we still have so many questions. So normally we would have, I know, right? How did that happen? Geez, that escalated quickly. So I want to make sure that we get to all of the questions because this is as much for people who are attending as it is for Chris and I, because a lot of times Chris and I will say, we have these conversations for us. We just happen to share that we're having the conversations and hope that it's helpful to other people. But a lot of the times we want to have these conversations. So I want to make sure that we do our job in making sure this conversation is for you all as well. So the other question, or another question, was, how do you balance how to educate an ally and how they can be helpful, and that ally doing their homework and on how they can be helpful? So I think they're just saying, how do you balance, I guess, telling them, and correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, if I mess up your questions, come back in and clarify as we're talking. But the way I'm understanding that question is, how do you balance like educating somebody and telling them you still have some homework to do? Like, how do you balance, just, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, how do you balance doing their homework for them and telling them to go and do their homework?
Well, I'll take that first, since I've been away for a bit. So I'll jump in briefly and say that, I think certainly as an African American or as a Muslim, you can certainly feel some discomfort when people come to you expecting you to explain to them what in your mind you may think they should already know, right? I should not have to explain to you that white supremacism is a real thing and a problem in society. I should not have to find the stats where you should know that already. That's part of the thought in my head. But at the same time, you've got to realize that people in this country, many people live a very sheltered existence. They have been cocooned, perhaps voluntarily, perhaps involuntarily. And so if someone comes to you genuinely, sincerely wanting to learn, I don't think you turn those people, even if the question may seem obvious, the answer may seem obvious to you, and it may seem like something they should already know. I do think that as a civil rights activist, as a leader, we do have an obligation, if someone comes to us, to try to some extent, give them some education, or at least point them in the right direction. We don't necessarily have time to be giving a full-blown class on these issues, though I do that. Actually, one of the things I do is go out explaining Islam and Muslims to people. I've spoken to political groups, church groups, the Tea Party, which is a fun conversation, by the way. So I do that as part of my work, right? So I don't mind it, but at the same time, it takes time and effort. And, I think people who are trying to be allies, you can't always expect that a Black person or a woman or a Muslim or a Jew is just going to be ready to stop what they're doing and explain history to you, right? If they're willing to do that, great. But if they kind of say, look, I don't have time for that, you've got to learn some of this stuff on your own, don't be offended, don't be hurt, just, kind of take the lesson and learn what you can based on what direction they give you.
I mean, I think this is a prime example. Tuning into shows like this, to connecting to programs like this, where you can put the question out there. You got folk that's going to answer. You got folk that's going to help you or give more information on different things. I think this is a perfect example. And Wendy said something a few moments ago that just the light bulb for me. The question with your son said about, imagine yourself as the marginalized person. How would you feel? How do you think? And I think just things like that are helpful. I think, again, how do we tap into all of these different types of programs, opportunities, and in relationship with others to ask those questions? Ask others, hey, I really want to know more about X. What's the best way of going about asking it? Or how do I connect in? Or can you direct me towards more information on X, Y, or Z? I think that's, it goes back to how we're in relation with each other. And if we want to know, we will know. There's a group of people on this show right now who want to know, and they found it. And so again, that's part of doing the homework, is to avail yourself, look for different types of programs, be connected, ask questions. And I wanted to personally thank Wendy for sharing the conversation that you had, because that was very helpful. See, I told you I'm about 2 years down on my ally training, so you're bringing me up to speed pretty quick there. So appreciate it.
So as we continue to read, and y'all can hear me, right? Yeah, you can. As we continue to take questions from our audience, another question I wanted to throw out there is, what are the obstacles to allyship between generations? I think that's a really smart question, because so many of the divides we see, you know, like even politically, older people tend to vote one way, younger people tend to vote another way, or at least they did before this pandemic. But that generation gap is often so different. Can you speak to how allyship can flow well between generations?
I think that's an interesting question that it goes through I mean, every type of allyship, I think, struggles with the difference in the way generations look at what they owe each other socially, what is appropriate behavior, you know, what their values are. And I think something that I have seen just on the LGBTQ plus side is, for instance, you are a gay man in your 60s. You might just think you know what it's like to be a trans girl in high school. You just think you do, because again, there are different privileges, right? And there are different ways of being marginalized. And if you went through that, or you lived through AIDS, it's tough to hear from someone younger, you're not getting me at all, or you get me this much, but that's not my experience. And I think it's tricky to find a way for younger people and older people to see what they share and to be open to what the other values and has experienced or is experiencing now. It's tricky. And it's hard to tell someone older than you need education. You need to learn about me, because, you know, the person on the other end is like, I've lived a pretty tough life, and you don't get to tell me how I need to be educated. I think we've been really lucky in the way my son has been able to participate in some projects where they ask an older person in the LGBTQ community to work with a younger person. And for instance, they have a retreat over a weekend and they write a play together, the two of them. Janelle, your mom was involved in one of these. She was one of the actors in one of those. And it changed, it just opened so many doors and opened for both sides. But I think especially for someone young, to see someone who has gone through the struggle and to meet someone who transitioned into the gender that they felt they should have been all along in their 50s, and what they lived through until then. It takes a lot of listening and some real magic getting the two together to hear each other.
Yeah, that you bring up a good point when you start to talk about the generations. You know, right now we're what, 5 generations deep, almost 6 generations deep, and I think it goes back to experience. I've heard like a lot of the silent generation of the traditionalists who were born, you know, before 1943 to say, I don't understand why all these white people are marching. Why? What they want? What is it that they want? Because they don't march for us. When you have your baby boomers who are kind of a little bit of both on the fence, and your millennials and your Gen Xers are saying, these are our friends. These are our you know, we grew up with this group. We've connected with these groups, and so the conversation really, and I always say this to Black folk, is we've been multi-generational forever. We just not have had those conversations or those labels. And so how do we continue to have the conversation about, when you ask a boomer about diversity, first thing we're going to talk about is race, ethnicity. When you ask a millennial about diversity, they're talking about skills, abilities, knowledge. We don't get into conversation. It's not about race. It's about, well, he's down with me because this is my boy. We've done all this stuff together. We grew up together. We went to school together. We live in the same neighborhood. And so I know he's down for the cause. And so how do we have those conversations of what allyship looks like between, and some of those conversations need to be interracial, you know, to say, this is where we are. Because if you think about it, the world has come into us earlier than we went into it. Back when the traditionalists and the boomers went out into the world much later. Now with computers, the world comes in earlier. My godson is 11 now, and for 8 years he only knew a black president. So to him, he could be president. Why? Because that's all he knew. And so the mindset we think about, you know, how do we have this conversation? We have to first have the conversation, Chris. And I think that's the starting part. We haven't had the conversation because we're sitting back. Again, I've seen people in some of the marches and things who are looking at, you know, white, Asian, LGBTQ with this suspicion, you know, and not knowing their story, you know, and not mixing in the multiracial piece into all of this, but not knowing their story and asking the question, so why are you so down? What do you want? Are you for real?
So I want to, oh, go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I wasn't going to say anything particularly unique, I don't think. I'll just say briefly, I'll note that the intergenerational thing, it's not even an old person, young person thing. I mean, even among young people, I mean, I'm 33 years old. If I compare myself to my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, it's like we're two different people. I thought when I was 16, 17, I was just I considered myself extremely liberal by comparison to my classmates and fellow students down in Georgia. And now I haven't really changed, but things have changed so much just in that short amount of time among younger people that my sister and I hardly agree on anything. I mean, I seem like an old stogie conservative compared to her, just by comparison. So there's even disagreement and differences between very young generations. And I think that's okay. You know, obviously, as a person of faith, I do believe there is such thing as right and wrong and fundamental truths. But when it comes to politics and political issues, you know, these things are debatable. I respect the differences, and I'm not going to think less of you or not be able to work with you because we have even a fundamental disagreement about how our country should handle a particular issue. So, you know, I just would hope that the older generation, the younger generation, you know, as we come together to confront injustices that threaten all of us, that we just have to realize that you're not a bigot if you're 60 years old and you view, you know, a certain issue a certain way, and someone who's 20 years old views it a different way. You just have a legitimate difference of opinion about something. And to the extent that you can either ignore that difference or try to bridge the gap, that would be great. And at the least, if you can't do either one of those things, then carry on and try to find someone to work with who you can.
I'm like waiting because my phone is ringing now. So like now you hear like whoever's calling me since it announces. So I'm just gonna wait so Jack doesn't yell at me later and like, why did you talk over this? And you know I can't use it. Okay, there we go. So I was just waiting for that. I was just talking my way through that. Okay, so we've got 11 questions, and I definitely, like I said, I promised people that we would get to all of their questions. So I want to make sure I get to their questions. I also want to remind you, if you want to make a donation or get in on the raffle, you still have time. We'll be drawing like as soon as we hit these questions. So click the link in the chat. So the next question is, given that white supremacy and racism are perpetrated by white people, and being an ally, is there a time white people should not be speaking up to other white people?
I feel like a pageant. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, I second that request.
Given that white supremacy and racism, and again, if you're still on, make sure you clarify the question if I am not saying something correctly. But given that white supremacy and racism are perpetrated by white people, and being an ally, is there a time white people should not be speaking up to other white people? So I'm not sure, but I guess kind of what I'm understanding maybe could be like, if you are both a perpetrator, can you speak? I'm not quite sure about that last part, but maybe speak a little bit to I guess, understanding your role in white supremacy and racism if you are a white ally, and understanding when you should be speaking up or not, maybe speaking a little bit to that.
Well, and also if it helps, and again, correct me if I'm reading your question wrong, but I think that we talk a lot about how, don't always go to your marginalized friend for answers, and also like how white people can go into a space that black people can't, or there are things that will be said in an all-white space that might not be said if there was a person of color there. But so it's like there's so much impetus in so many ways where it's important for white people to speak up. But at the same time, I can understand as a white person, well, I don't want to speak up because I'm going to say it wrong because I'm part of this white supremacy thing. So I think maybe the question is about that tension. How do you know when to speak up as a white person, even though you are probably complicit in some way with white supremacy?
That was an excellent translation. It's a good question, excellent translation of the question. So I think, what I would say very briefly, since I know we don't have a lot of time, is that, if you're in an environment where there are African Americans and others who are experts in leading the fight against this issue, then, you don't want to be the first one to jump ahead and start screaming or fighting about this issue. You want to follow the lead of the people who are in the lead, right? But if you're in a situation where it's just you, a racist person, other white people, and no one else, they are not going to be corrected unless you speak up, then guess what? It's on you. So in those circumstances, no, I don't think there's a situation in which you shouldn't speak up if you feel that you effectively can, do so.
Well, so your answer is helpful and maybe takes you into the next question, which is how does an ally pull back without kind of like a negative response when that ally may have overreached or overstepped, either through thought, word, or deed. So in response to, I guess, what you just said, now that you've made it a point to speak up because you know that you're supposed to do that, how do you pull back if you overstep?
I think you own it. You own it. I think you own it, and you say, hey, I stepped out, I overspoke, or I misspoke, or I made a mistake, or I may not. I think you have to own it and be okay with that, and then move forward. That's just my thought.
Well, and
so
also
another question. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No. A lot of the stuff. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it reminds me of a lot of the stuff that Wendy's been saying about just you don't get to be fragile. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you're going to get embarrassed. And like being an ally is hard. So I think that's the moment where as an ally you say, you know what? I didn't get in this to be comfortable and happy all the time. I got in this to help. And so that's how I'm going to, work through whatever pushback I get, step back, own it, like you said, and then, onward with the work. Maybe educate myself on that thing I messed up.
That one's a good one. Maybe like once you've owned it, like what now going deeper into that, because it may have been really easy for you to misspeak out of an ignorance in that particular area. So maybe going even deeper into the thing that you messed up. So that's good. As a member of a minority group, does it make it easier to be an ally for members of different minority groups? How can I be sure to not take away the focus from the group I'm trying to act as an ally for? Which I think is a great question. And I often have this question myself. So
yes.
I'm gonna be quiet so you guys can tell me what to do.
So I'll say, as a Black man, that's one group. As a Muslim, that's another group. And so, I really, number one, I really don't think of myself, try not to think of myself as a marginalized this or marginalized that. I think it's personally demeaning to me. So I don't think of myself that way. But obviously there's no way to ignore the fact that you are a minority, that you are Black, that you are Muslim, that you are this and that in the society. And so for me, I think it absolutely does make it easier to ally with other minority groups because to some extent, you can understand what they're going through. Not fully, because every group is different. What I go through as a Black man is different than what a woman goes through, different than what a Jewish person goes through. Everyone has different experiences. But when you are a minority in this country, when you have been targeted because of who you are, what you believe, or how you look, then you are able to some extent to understand other people who have gone through those similar experiences better than someone who has lived a life of privilege and never experienced those things. And I think you also have the credibility where you're more easily welcomed, as an ally, a close ally in those circumstances, without having to go through 99 questions. So I think that is true, that it can be easier if you are a minority that has experienced some stuff to partner with other minorities. But just being a minority doesn't mean you're good and you're cool and that you can easily partner with minorities. Remember, there are other minorities who do just as much harm as people in the majority race. In fact, the question earlier mentioned white supremacism and racism are perpetrated by white people. Well, that's not true. Number one, racism can be anti-Black, anti-white, anti-Arab, whatever. So that's the first thing. But number two, there are Black people who perpetrate white supremacism. We talked about a certain individual earlier who I will not mention the name again. But there are Black people who knowingly or unknowingly participate in the system and further the system. And so just being a minority does not mean you're cool and you understand everything, but it can help depending on your experiences.
I like that, like, everybody gives a thumbs up, like, yes, me too. Control C, Control V. Okay, so, right, everybody's like, we're getting through these questions. We're burning through these questions. It's a lot.
Right, yes, here we go.
So what are some specific ways we can incorporate inclusion as being a good ally, be it professional or in a social environment?
When I think of inclusion, I think about who's at the table, and then seeing who's at the table, making sure that everybody's voice is heard at the table. Not just because you're there doesn't mean your voice is heard, but inviting people into the conversation. I think sometimes we get so riled up in the conversation that we don't invite people into the conversation. So it goes back, and how do we invite individuals into the conversation to hear their voice, which should create inclusion, because then there's all the voices that are spoken or heard from at the table.
Perfect. Also, that was really important, because it's not just about, I think it is easy to look at the board and we're just like, yes, now we've got these faces on the board, we're good. But making sure everybody is heard is very, very important. I think that's, sometimes we take the first step and then we just stop. And that's an example of how we take the step of including somebody, but we still exclude them once they're in the building. So that's a really, really good point. So let's see, another question. Do you have any recommendations on identifying your own biases, privileges, and blind spots in order to improve your ability to be an ally? Is it simply a matter of doing your research and accepting that you will make mistakes and being open to being corrected?
You know, one of the things that we do a inventory. So we list everything: gender, race, sexual identity, gender identity, and we just go through and we look at what are the things that you are aware of on a daily basis. What are the things that you're not aware of, to kind of do the inventory to see where who are we, and then to think about what are our biases, what are things that we know that. So part of it is doing some inner work, some biases, to check your own biases, what and then where does that come from, and then to do the work on those. I think a lot of times we're quick not to do self-inventory because we're so busy focused on the group, the making the difference in the larger group. But really it begins with self, and doing that self-inventory and understanding, checking our own biases and understanding how we have and what they are and calling them out. And that's the tough work.
You know, we kind of talked about this in a similar way leading up to tonight. And so I asked my kid again what he thought, and I thought this was an interesting way of putting it. Turn off the part of your brain that tells you you're a good ally. Turn that part off and then listen and then look. If you've got somebody you can trust and don't feel like you're putting them under too much emotional labor, ask them. But I think it's so easy to get to a point in your life, in your allyship, in the ways that you see yourself as, say, a liberal, to be like, I got this. It doesn't matter what the cause is. I'm going to have the right answer because I'm an ally. And taking a moment to just remove that filter for yourself and really listen and really think of impact versus intention, it makes a difference.
Listen, that kid of yours, he's
all right.
He's something. Yeah. Okay, how do we be a good ally in regards to these large companies that are just being performative or not even acknowledging that Black Lives Matter at all? Is the answer boycott or try to change them in other ways?
So I don't, if a company, let's say a company decides to embrace the Black Lives Matter slogan, and let's say you think they're being insincere, I don't think the response to that is we're going to boycott you because even though you said something we like, we don't think you really mean it, so we're not going to use your product anymore. I don't think that's an effective way to handle it. It's just going to scare people who may have good intentions out of trying to even do that much. So I think what the way to handle is to say, all right, great, thank you for that. Now, how are you going to put the words that you've embraced into action, right? Is to push them to take the next step, not to just say, oh, congratulations, great, thank you, we're so happy and now it's all done. But no, all right, now that you've expressed that you believe this, that you believe Black Lives Matter, then what are you going to do to show it? And, open those lines of dialogue and get some concrete commitments and proposals. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll just briefly say, right now in China, there are about 1 million Uyghur Muslims locked in concentration camps being forced to give up their belief in God and their culture. And I sat down with very high-ranking executives at Coca-Cola, and before we even took it to, because Coca-Cola has a factory in this area, and the factory is possibly benefiting from forced labor from people in these camps. And so we sat down with Coca-Cola, and before we could even get into the discussion about the issue, they spent the first 20 minutes showing me all the nice, wonderful things they're doing in the world to help impoverished people in difficult circumstances. And, I'm not saying that they thought that was going to mollify me, but, for me, that only reinforced, like, if you believe in helping people through your corporation, then you should be even more committed to not having factories open that are potentially benefiting from forced labor. So again, it's, if you believe this, if your position is you only care about money, and that's what you say from the beginning, then okay, I expect nothing more from you. But if you want to put yourself out there and say, I care about people, I care about human lives, then put your money where your mouth is.
And that's a great point. Can I say this real quick? This thing about the boycott of the companies, this one day I'm going to boycott Walmart because you're going to shop the day before or the day after, because they're going to get the money that you didn't spend that one day. I just want to say this. If you're going to, the question I want to ask is, what are you willing to sacrifice? The bus boycott, those folks walked for weeks. It wasn't like, well, we're going to not ride the bus for one day, and then we're going to go back to ride the bus, or we're going to ride the bus. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice? And that's what, I like the energy and the momentum behind that, but a one-day boycott of Walmart, really? Is that really going to make a difference? They're not going to really miss those dollars. Now, 1 month,
not for one day,
2 months, 3 months, and the question is, what are you willing to sacrifice? And that's why I go back to the bus boycott, because the sacrifice was riding that bus every day.
So the next question is, how do we approach racism within our family units without hurting the movement even more? hang on to, or without A, hurting the movement even more, or B, hanging on to important people in our lives, or while doing both, I suppose. And I think you kind of answered this a little bit before, but just in case they didn't hear the answer, how do we approach racism in our own family unit without hurting the movement, but also still hanging on to the important people in our lives?
Well, you know, in that situation, and I think, you know, I've even coming from a Black family, I've heard and seen things that were inappropriate, and obviously I've got white friends who've told me things that, you know, were inappropriate. And so, you know, I think the benefit of having families say that is that, number one, you're stuck together. Even if you call them out, they still have to love you, in theory, depending on how far gone they are. And so, you know, you've got that opportunity to really be frank with someone and come to it from a position of caring, of loving, not of, I'm better than you, you're a bad person, but look, I love you, I care about you, but what you just said is wrong. It doesn't make sense, and you're better than this. You raised me, you were raised with me, you know, and I know in your heart you are better than this and have to be better than this, and this doesn't make any sense. And so I think, you know, that's the first step, is just directly approaching the issue. Oftentimes it's easier in family just to say, that's Uncle Jack, you know, he's just being him, and I'm not even going to deal with it. Nothing's going to change about Uncle Jack, and I'm just going to move on. But no, Uncle Jack can change. Talk to him politely, as a family member deserves to be treated politely, and do what you can. And then, you know, if you want to really get clever about it, maybe you need to invite over to your house for dinner the person who Uncle Jack has a problem with. If Uncle Jack's got a problem with Muslims, thinks they all want to kill him, well, maybe Uncle Jack needs to sit down for dinner with a Muslim and survive the evening. And maybe that'll be a first step towards changing his mind, right? I mean, you know, so you can take it a little further and think of what you can do. But when it's family, I think always be respectful. In the Quran, we believe that God says that if your own parents don't believe in God, or idol worshippers or something, you still treat them with love and respect. And even if you're with respect, and if you are familiar with Islam, you know that the biggest sin one can commit is worshiping something other than God in our theology. And so even a person who engages in that behavior, that sin, we are taught, if they are your parents, you treat them with respect. You don't even say oomph, a negative sound to them, because they're your family. So I think, you know, you can approach this issue directly and forthrightly, but politely with your relatives.
So another question, how do you feel about companies posting to social media about their donations? Is it regarded as performative or as a way to be transparent?
Can it be both?
I guess the answer to both, yeah. I was going to say, both truths can be true. Do you have any additional thoughts on that? Is it good, bad, or indifferent? Is it?
I think it could be both, but I think it's how it's posted. I think what's if they're saying we did X amount, we did this, we donated this to change this, move this, affect this, is one thing. But to say we, you know, donated X amount of money for Black Lives Matters, and we're good. To me, that's just, you just put it out there. I need to know, so you donated, so why? Where is it going? How are you going to make sure that it's happening? To what you put out there. And I think the thing is how it's put out there. And again, if it's somebody new, I want to know what made you do that. So a lot of it has to do is how it's posted. I don't have a problem with being on social media, but how is it posted?
How can white artists create art? We're in the last 3 questions, guys. We're going to make it, I promise.
Okay, we can do it.
We can do it. How can white artists create art about racism that honors the struggle without appropriating or benefiting from the struggle? And I think that they're asking specifically about race, but I imagine that could be applied to other things too. But specifically, this particular person is asking about race.
But you know, the educator in me always says giving credit to those who the art is about, giving credit to where the muse comes from, giving credit to to where the idea came from, giving credit to where the art comes from, as opposed to saying, this is mine and I created this to do that. Give credit where credit is due.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to let you handle the last two questions while I get ready to pull some names. I also want to tell our panelists, as we're coming up on these last two questions, usually we do a leave and take away, but we are running up on time already. So I just want you to have a final leave if you can. So if there's something that you can leave with the audience, what would that be? So be thinking of that while Chris reads the last two questions.
Now, forgive me, y'all, because I'm reading this on a monitor that's a little far away. So if I mess it up, you know, have patience with me. But so this next question says, I think that a challenge for some of us trying to be allies, especially if we're used to privilege, is that we want to get immediate. I don't know. Is that? See, you know what? Listen, I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna stand up. 1 second. Okay.
This is what happens when you get your fancy new studio.
Right. But then, like, the question's not in front of me. Listen, I think that a challenge for some of us trying to be allies, especially if we're used to privilege, is that we want to get immediate success. Now that we have a deeper understanding of systemic oppression, we haven't been in the struggle as long or as intensely, so we struggle with patience and/or finding a life balance. Any advice? Spoiler alert, I'm a college-educated, middle-class, cisgender, straight white male. Yeah, so any thoughts on that you get in and you want immediate results because you haven't been in the struggle as long?
His spoiler alert was great, by the way.
I know, yeah. Shout out to the spoiler alert from that question asker.
I mean, patience. You just gotta patience. You gotta know your why. You gotta know why you're in it, and you gotta stick with the patience. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon.
Okay, and then this is the very last question, y'all. So we are just like barely finishing these, right? And thank you all so much for your questions, and thank you to our panelists for your time and for your wonderful answers. I think has been a really a great conversation. I think people have really learned from it. But
it has.
What? Hello? Can you hear me?
No, yeah, we can. I was just saying it has. I was agreeing with you. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you said what happened. Forgive me. Anyway, so this last question says, what can you do as a person of color when your friends who declared themselves to be allies stop their efforts, but still consider themselves to be so, especially when you're trying to run a company with them? Oh, no. What is the best course of action, in your opinion, when this happens? As a person of color, is it our responsibility to call out these allies?
Well,
So, yeah,
I'll say briefly, as my last remark, I'll say that, I think when you're working with someone who is a member of your particular community, in this case, a fellow person of color, a fellow believer, or fellow woman, whatever the community is, and they have declared themselves to be, if you yourself are a person of color, and your friends say they're allies, but they are not showing that in their actions or holding you back, should you call them out? Well, again, the same advice I gave about family is what I would give about friends, only with maybe a little less deference, given the lack of blood ties. You have to be stuck with a bad friend, right? You're stuck with family, but not friends. So I would essentially say the same thing there. It's no problem to confront these issues. And if your friends can't deal with being confronted about it, then maybe they weren't friends in the first place.
So we've finished our questions. It's 8:32, so we'll zoom past, but I definitely want to thank you guys for being here, to our panelists. This has been amazing. I really couldn't have asked for a better way to do this episode. Honestly, this has been great. So it's good that it didn't happen when we wanted it to happen, because it happened better than we thought it would. So that's good. So thank you so much, Arthur Gregg, Wendy Koster, Edward Mitchell, for being here. We really, really appreciate it. Also for the attendees that have come and asked all of these great questions. This has been amazing. But I do want you guys to give a leave. So what is something, we'll go with Mr. Gregg first, Ms. Koster, Mr. Mitchell, in that order. If you will just go and give us a leave. What is something that you want our audience to take away with them after this conversation, how to be a good ally? And as soon as they do that, we'll tell you your winners and we'll be out. Oh, you're on. There we go.
Simply know your why and do the homework, do the self-inventory, and just know your why.
I think in my case, just keep in mind as an ally, you have less fear of retaliation. The response you get is different from the population that you're trying to be an ally for. So speak up and don't be afraid to do it, because that's why you're there.
I agree with all that. I would just say that for coming from the perspective as a Muslim community leader, I would just say that the best thing that anyone can do, for us to be a good ally is to try to address the bigotry that exists in their own midst, they see in their own daily life. As civil rights leaders, we're going to court, we're filing lawsuits. We got that. We're fighting that battle. The thing that really could help us in the long term is changing hearts and minds. So if you know people in your circle, and you almost certainly do, who hold anti-Muslim views, if you think you are able to have those conversations with them, great. If you need us to send you some information, you want us to have a conversation with that person, visit your church, visit your political group, whatever, then bring us along. Because I think that we are winning great victories in the courts of law, even the court of public opinion. But I do worry about hearts and minds, especially with one half of the country that is following this madman, excuse me for using such a description, because I know we're not political, following this individual who does things that I find sometimes to be dangerous and disheartening. And so I really worry about, they're people and they hate what they don't understand. And I don't mind someone hating me if they know what I really stand for, but I really hate the idea of someone disliking me and they don't even know why they dislike me. So that's the one thing I would say would be helpful to the Muslim community is, you see that bigotry in your midst, let us know and do what you can to stop it.
Thank you again so much for being here. Like I said, I'm super humbled that you were here. I also want to make sure that I take a moment before we leave to tell our attendees who the raffle winners were. So the winner of the Echoes Media swag box is Carrie Stewart. The winner of the $15 Amazon gift card is Ariel Cobb. And the winner of the $25 Uber Eats, and I'm so sorry I messed your name up, and I hate messing people's names up, so please forgive me, but maybe forget me once I mess this up. Nayoka Manuelos. So you will be getting the $25 Uber Eats along with my apology for messing up your name that I apparently do every time. So my apologies, I swear I will learn it. Thank you again to everybody for being here. Thank you for, again, the great questions. If you have more questions that you would like to send us an email, we will maybe sweet talk our lovely panelists into responding to one or two more questions later, but keep doing the work, keep taking, and honestly, this is I know I wasn't supposed to leave anything in particular, but I am gonna leave. Take care of yourself while you're doing all of this. Allyship is hard work. Social justice work is hard work. So take care of yourself. On that note, do you have something or do you want to brand us out, Chris?
Oh, you know what? Actually, I do. I have two quick takeaways, things that I've learned in this conversation. I'll just give them to you because it's one sentence each. Sentence one, my allyship has expired. That was a word.
Yes.
Sentence two, yes. Turn off the part of your brain that says you're a good ally. I think that's remembering that sometimes your allyship can just be out of date. That's 2017 model, and you need to get up to the 2020 model. And then also turn off the part of your brain that says you're a good ally. Just, if I didn't think of myself as a great ally, how would I hear this? And I think that's great
Yeah.
advice. So those are my takeaways from this conversation. I want to say thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you, Janelle, for putting this together. Like, Janelle out here putting together whole events, like in quarantine, via Zoom, whole other model of organizing events. So, and of course, thank you to everybody who tuned in. We appreciate y'all so much. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in for these live events. We so appreciate your support, and we appreciate you being part of the conversation. And y'all's questions were so on point. Your questions were amazing.
Yes.
That's all I have.
The questions were really good. Yes. Thank you so much to everyone. Create hope, forge a path, change the world. We will see you out there in the fight. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See you next time, God willing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.